don't think I'll post it, but I'll record it anyway. So what do y'all think? Does having a separate service with one of them being explicitly low or traditional, right one is the more traditional in the 79, or, low is whatever, but, and then having another service which is higher, the intention, I think, is to give people variety who have different preferences. What do you, am I off base there? Are there other reasons that I'm not thinking of right now?
I think, so the common formats that I see, I guess my concern about this, I don't think there's a way to win this one, because on the one hand, so I'm in a fairly small parish, I think, but it turned out I only knew half the people there, because the other half of the people went to the Right One service, which was generally older people who were more comfortable with the 28 language that they grew up with.
Right.
And then it was the younger crowd who grew up with the 79. And I found out, I don't know half these people. And I'm on their, executive committee or whatever, I'm like, I've never met you before. Thanks to your vote. Like, what? But then on the other hand, I've seen churches try to rotate through. So like the first Sunday of the month, we'll do this high church thing. And then the second one, we'll sing rock and roll music. And then the third week, we'll make it into a children's service. And then you just piss off everybody.
Right. Yeah. I think that the two service approach, which is a pretty standard across the Anglican world, it reinforces liturgy partisanship in a way which is just so toxic to the life of the church, but also like in terms of the whole church, but also it's pretty toxic with regards to the life of the soul as well. I mean, when we were Baptists, I remember the spirit of critique that was brought into the service, and frankly, it was because they were making, Baptists like to make it up. It changes a lot from week to week, and that's kind of part of the DNA. And I think the non-denom Baptist churches we were in, that was kind of part of what made it attractive to people. So, what I would criticize, they would be like, yeah, we like that. So, but I do remember that one of the things that it always put spiritually, it made people critiquers of worship. It just kind of, that was how it manifested. Have you guys seen that? Do you guys see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. Father Tony, at St. Barnabas's, we actually had 3 pretty distinct services. The 9 o'clock was considered the low mass, and there was for many years there was no music at all. There was not an organ, there was not a choir. It was all sad, and people became very attached to, I'm a low churchman, so I'm only going to go to the 9 o'clock service. And when we instituted music at 9 o'clock, just the organ, there was concern that people might actually leave the church because they'd gotten so attached to the liturgy. And so we agonized over that decision.
Yeah.
Then the 11 o'clock was considered higher, where we have incense and a gospel procession, and some things were chanted. And then there was the solemn high, with celebrant, deacon, subdeacon, a lot of whirling and twirling. And you always knew.
You the twirler, Bill?
Yeah, we did a lot of twirling. It was very elaborate. It was very elaborate. People came very attached, and you would not see a 9 o'clocker going to an 11 o'clock. Right. You would not see someone who went to a solemn high come to the 9 o'clock. So I think that was sort of seen as we want to try and provide something for everybody.
Right.
The problem is when they came, they did become very attached. That was their service.
Right.
Form their circle of friends. the sort of the ministries that they were involved in weren't according to, we're members of this parish, this
Right.
is our church family, this is the service that I go to.
Sure. Yeah, and in a certain sense, I mean, St. Barnabas is a big parish. Uh, there's going to be subdivisions of social life which are natural and okay. But okay, so I've been thinking about this high and low thing, Bill. You know this as we've been talking through just what we were going to do for this Trinity Sunday, and a different. I want to have a different culture with regards to liturgy. And Luke, I think this will be a good conversation for you because you kind of see it from your side at Christ Church with that liturgy is approached very much in terms of preference, and yet I think that liturgy is supposed to be a dance. It's supposed to be something that you lose yourself in, and whatever the dance is, that's how you dance. I mean, if someone was invited to a party and they played a really simple dance and they said, I like elaborate dances, this is stupid, well, then they would just be a party pooper. And opposite is true. If someone was playing a really lively dance and they're like, I don't like this kind of music, I like said dances, I'm just joking, I mean, that would be ridiculous. So in one sense, I think a flexible church that has a bit of humor with regards to, or a levity in a certain sense of that word, with their engagement with the liturgy. They're not so tied down to what we do is good. But I think the better way to do this, and I think this is the crux, is that it should be attached to the liturgical year. I think that a healthy parish and a healthy Christian should be able to worship with pulling out all the stops on Easter, right? And I think that a healthy Christian should be able to push in all the stops on Trinity 19. There's ordinary time, and then there's festal time. There's two calendars that work together, and so there's a flexibility in the Christian year, which teaches us to regulate our highness and lowness on the liturgy based upon the time or the purpose for our worship. And what I think is that when that happens, people when they think about liturgy, it avoids them thinking about it in terms of their preference, and it actually serves the purpose that it should have, which is it becomes a part of a more or less elaborate worship or liturgy towards God.
I think the flexibility piece. That's a good comment. I mean, that's how the Old Testament worship was structured.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
there were high days and there were all the other days.
Right.
And they were scattered throughout the year. I think it's appropriate because it calls us out of what starts to feel maybe normal,
right,
into something that's other than normal. I think people are still going to have their preferences.
Sure.
But I also think that, if it's taught the right way and done with the right spirit, that people find, this probably doesn't sound right, but they find more grace in their heart to allow things to happen that they're not quite as comfortable with, or they're, that's really not my preference. But, I'm a lower churchman, so it only happens, a couple times a year, and, vice versa with the folks that are on the higher end of the scale. I think the crux of it all is really figuring out what's most edifying for the people, which is, what we should be pursuing in the liturgy. And that, I think, is going to vary by parish, location, all of that.
Sure.
If you had a if you were planting a church in the middle of a Baptist community, probably wouldn't go off the other end and, be a super high Anglican expression.
Sure.
But if you were planting somewhere like kind of like we are, where I was talking to Luke about this today. There's nothing on this side of town that is more of the, if you want to call it this, old school or traditional expression of Anglicanism, and I think it fits brilliantly out this way. So where do you find the middle ground with edifying the body that Christ brings to us? That's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not. It's not. And but I do think that having a range of liturgical ability and expression that's tied to the mighty acts of God as we celebrate them in the liturgy, in the calendar, is the healthiest and, in my mind, the only proper way to approach the high-low spectrum. I think that it has been a fatal, and I mean fatal, flaw in the Anglican tradition for quite some time. And it afflicts tech, it afflicts the RAC, it afflicts the ACNA. Liturgy is a function of the mighty acts of God in the calendar. It has, I think, very little to do with preference, geography, culture, although it does have something to do with those, of course. We simply don't know how to sing the Mass yet. So for me to impose it on Christ the King would not be edifying. It would be confusing and frustrating. So of course there's that, but given in an ideal. So I'll tell you guys what, my plan is, once we grow more than our space can fit, we'll split into 2 services. And those 2 services will be identical.
Suzanne's applauding back here.
Yeah, and on Trinity Sunday.
But I'm a smells and bells girl, just so you know.
Yeah. Well,
I'll stand over the incenser and just be like, "Give me more, give me more, give me more."
Yeah, and on so and I think that way the only thing that will separate people from others is if they're early birds or not. Not whether they're birds. I was talking with a parishioner today who helped set up in the morning. We were out there at 6:00 this morning. And he said, one thing I really appreciate is that Anglicans know how to celebrate things. He had been, it was one of the Tryon kids. And even Karen said it today. I didn't have the opportunities, she said, to memorialize or to commemorate my four children who were baptized before in this way. And today was a special day. We pulled out all the stops for us. That was all the stops we were capable of pulling today. We have a little organ, only a few stops. But we bought paper tablecloths from Costco. We bought $7 prosecco instead of $40 champagne. But we did. It was maybe it was lipstick on a pig. I don't know, but it was our best. But there is this. I want this dynamism. I think it's the only way to properly view liturgical variety within a parish is to see it as within the flow of the calendar. But I might be being too harsh. I'm sure there's other ways to think about it properly that I'm not seeing. But yeah, we can move on unless you guys have any other thoughts on that.
Well, another advantage of the approach you're describing, Father Tony, is it provides ongoing opportunity for catechesis, which, as I hear, never ends. So the difference between Trinity Sunday or Ascension Day and
Mm.
Trinity 17 is we're doing some extra things here, and here's why. It's like you described what the purpose and meaning of incense is today. So the catechesis is tied to pulling out more stops on particular days,
Right.
rather than having, okay, now I know exactly what's going to happen for the next 52 Sundays because I'm a low churchman or I'm a high churchman.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, I mean, if you just think about what we do in our regular lives, it makes total sense. We celebrate birthdays. We celebrate wedding anniversaries. We celebrate work anniversaries. There are special days where the dance looks different. And, I love the way you put the calendar to this, because like that's what God did through history. He created certain moments that the church, over the millennia has found ways to memorialize in a special way. And so I think if you don't do that, then you are in a way detracting from these moments that God has created for us to, I dare say, enjoy him more fully.
Yeah. I don't want to have Prosecco every Sunday. That would not be my flavor.
I don't want to have Prosecco any Sunday, but I'll bring my own.
Yeah. So this brings up the larger topic of high and low spectrums. In Dallas, it was such a funny conversation that people would have when they would talk about Chapel of the Cross. Chapel of the Cross on their website says a low church parish in the Anglican tradition. That was on their website. Whatever. I love Chapel of the Cross, and I love their liturgy. Everyone that was an Anglican elsewhere in the church that would visit would be like, "Phew, that was high." And we're like, you should look at our website. It says low. But to them, it was high. And it clued me in that there is at least two different spectrums that have high and low attached to them. Tarsitano mentions a lot of others. Like, for instance, low at one time meant that Parliament should control the church. Of course, we don't have that. We don't have that definition of the spectrum. But I wanted to point out at least two. I think it'll help in discussing in the future high and low. I think in one sense, let's just say in the older, more traditional sense, high and low was a way of distinguishing those churches that were more ritualistic, maybe more those that were tending towards what's an Anglo-Catholicism. And then a low church was more simple in its liturgy, more Protestant sometimes in its leanings. These are general, broad brushes here, but in general, generally less music and singing of the liturgy. So it's very much it's the high-low services at St. Barnabas. It's probably the right one, right to at Christ Church. That's the old definition. But in the ACNA and in kind of the modern Anglican world outside of the traditionalists, high means, or I should say low means celebratory. You hear the word celebratory a lot in Episcopal circles. Luke, have you heard the word celebratory with regards to the liturgy?
Yeah.
So there was a movement around the 70s, I think, that the liturgy is a celebration, which, of course, in a certain sense, it is. But what this produced was kind of this happy, clappy, way of being, which very much became conflated and combined with the Jesus movement and kind of that hippie, low church, rock and roll thing. And so that instead of this somber Protestant, serious, quiet thing being referred to as low, which is the one that was on the website, right? Now low means almost the exact opposite. Low is now, electric guitars, a bongo, ripped jeans, tight jeans, for the worship leader, screens, and a celebratory feel. And high now means anything which is somber, whether that is simple or elaborate. So you see, like, it's almost as if the entire old spectrum, which used to have a high and low component, is now absorbed and put in a high category. And evangelical styles of worship, or celebratory styles of worship, not to say that those are the same, I think that they both influence the movement, have kind of created a new category in Anglican expression, which is now considered low. Do you guys see that? Any other thoughts on the high-low spectrum and kind of the way it's confused?
I think the way you described it, I would generally agree with. I still think they're just terms, and I think that people who tend to use the terms are familiar with them to start with, but their familiarity kind of comes from what perhaps generation they grew up in. Yeah. So, if someone says, that's a low church, they're simply referencing something compared to what they've experienced, or vice versa if they say it's high.
Yeah. And Tarsitano mentions that he doesn't use the word hackneyed. I think he said indecipherable. And high and low, they mean nothing anymore. I always, anytime anyone uses, I say, what do you mean by that? Because it might mean something. They're the most hackneyed terms in all of Christendom. And I think that they have been reinforced more than any other factor by the two-service system. A little bit different read on that, take on that is, a lot of times the two-service system was used to introduce Holy Communion during the Eucharistic renewal movement. This transition in the Episcopal Church where communion became offered weekly, which, I'll comment on that in a minute. But the two-service kind of even furthered that split between the morning prayer people and the communion people. Okay, a comment on morning prayer and communion. So there's no question in the prayer book that communion is the principal Sunday service. There's no question in my mind that Cranmer intended this when he wrote the prayer book. However, the problem with the Eucharistic renewal movement is that it, in many cases, certainly in the popular use of the Eucharistic renewal movement, it did not give adequate place to the daily offices. In my opinion, if there is a church, and I'm struggling with this at Christ the King too, if there's a church that does not keep the daily office as part of its normal life, I'm not convinced that Holy Communion ought to be the principal service each week. Another way to say this is, I think that for weekly communion to be a healthy practice for the church, it must be connected by daily morning prayer. We're not just supposed to check into heaven in its highest form once a week and then not touch prayer in the scriptures for 6 days. Furthermore, it is the assumption of the prayer book that morning prayer is said before the Eucharistic liturgy on Sundays. And so I don't know if this was the case at St. Barnabas, Deacon Bill, But I know at chapel, if there was a Sunday that had Eucharist first, the priest would say morning prayer, sometimes privately, beforehand, because in the prayer book, it's morning prayer, then Holy Communion. But you don't go into Holy Communion without saying morning prayer first. So, which is why we generally do the combo liturgy at Christ the King, to kind of check that box.
At Holy Trinity, we used to do morning prayer, and a lot of it was sung. And then we would break for Sunday school and then come back and do communion.
Really? And and people stayed for that.
Yeah.
It was a pretty decent attendance, although I would say the communion service at 11 had greater attendance.
Sure. So
not everybody would
a lot
come
of
for
people would
morning
just come
prayer,
for
but
catechesis and then come to communion. I love that. Yeah. All right. Let's close with talking about customs. Let's talk about customs in general. What are some customs that you guys have had in your churches that might be weird to the rest of us?
Present.
there we go. Hey, Tony, I was gonna make a comment. I already did make a comment about your frozen face on the screen, but a totally different comment. That in the parishes that I've been in, where there's been two services, typically, and where there was a clear division between those two groups, I've also found a less than robust format for catechizing people, for instructing people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think robust instruction about what we do, why we do it, and how it is meaningfully brought into each person's life and affects us, like combats all of the divisiveness that can naturally occur, because we're just fallen beings. We attach ourselves to habits and ritual and liturgies in church and outside of church. And with our rugged individualism in America, like, we stick to our guns on those things. But when someone comes along and humbly educates us, it kind of opens us up, and you're like, oh, well, I never really thought of it that way before. And so I think where the education is good, I don't think you run into the same problems with doing more than one service. I don't think it causes division. It becomes a thing of, hey, the older folks like to get in a little earlier. They're up early anyway. Sure. Then they go get the senior special at the local restaurant, and that's all great.
Yeah. I'm not against having an early service. A little later.
Huh?
I'm not against at all having an early service. It's only when the reasons for one service being in existence is to give a different liturgical preference. It's their cup of tea, just how they like it.
Yeah.
And it's just not healthy. And as you said, it doesn't lend towards catechesis, because you're just saying, you are how you are. Your preferences are king. So just stay exactly where you are, and then I will feed you just what you like.
Yeah. And to some degree, I actually don't disagree with that. However, I struggle with it when it exists in the same parish. If there was another parish 2 blocks away in the city, like how it used to be, actually, they might have a quote unquote lower service, and that'd be fine. That'd be totally fine.
Yeah. No doubt.
But it can lead to massive divisiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. Customs. When I froze up. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
St. Barnabas used to have morning prayer at 9:00 2 Sundays a month, and the parishioners really liked it. The clergy, though, recognizing what you just did, that Eucharist is the principal service of the week, felt as though they had to make a choice because of scheduling. And so they eliminated morning prayer. Now evening prayer is done on some retreat days and things like this. But I do know that many of the parishioners miss morning prayer. And so I like what you've done, which is providing an ante-communion before the communion, because there's reasons that we should be able to do both in a single parish.
What was that? Yeah. It makes for a longer service, the combo liturgy. We didn't do morning prayer today because we had the baptism. So I know it was long already. It was a long service. I think it was an hour and 25 minutes. So, all right. I want to ask you guys, what are some customs in your churches that are interesting? That maybe might be particular to your parish. Jenny, every church has customs. So we're not talking about just Anglican customs. So in the past, in your churches, you can think of some too, I'm sure.
Well, when you were talking about the church having the different services and having a different feel, the different services, it's like trying to have 3 different churches.
Yeah.
Whereas like there's a service, and if you don't like that particular service, there's a church down the street that's going to be really good for you.
Right.
Instead of trying to cater to, like, we're at the mall. You go to this shop and then you're going to go in this shop.
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre.
That's a great way of putting it, Jenny, it's like being at a mall. I think that I hadn't made that connection between that and consumerism. But
James K.A. Smith, you'd love that book, Jenny.
Yes.
Based on what you just said. You Are What You Love by James K.A. Smith.
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about the mall as being a temple. The secularism is temple. Really, really good. Yeah, but you're right, Jenny. It is like a mall. Come to this if you like this, and then if you like that, come to that. Yeah. So what are some customs? I'll lead off. There was every year, I forget, is it I think it's on Lent 4, or it's during a fast season. They would make, one of the ladies at the chapel made this cake. It's called Semnol cake. And and it was, I loved it. It was like a fruit cake with like a hard frosting on the top. And no one ever took the time to explain why we did a Semnol cake, although I think it was in the bulletin one year, but who reads that? But I think even apart from its liturgical or theological background, the fact that this was the way that Cynthia loved her parish every year, and it was a way that the parish could count on being loved that way, was such a healthy thing. And I think that's part of the power of customs in a parish. I don't really care what a custom is, unless it's abominable or in direct contradiction to Scripture. There's such a value in just and this is part of the sermon, just the giving of self to others. And when you say, that's really good, do that again, then it's a custom. Thank you for doing that. Do it again. That's a custom. So with that, what are some customs in your guys' parishes, in your past? They don't have to be like that one.
I had a church where somebody owned this small donkey, and so every Palm Sunday, the donkey was like I think they brought it in the church a couple times. It didn't work out well, but it was always at least outside the church. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
So Bill can attest to this one at St. Barnabas.
Oh yeah, St.
When
Barnabas.
we got there,
the African celebration, International Day, I think they call it, right, Bill?
International Day of Thanksgiving. Yeah, it was really cool.
We have such a large, Luke, you may not know this, but at St. Barnabas, we have a large group of immigrant Nigerians. the Anglican Church is very big in Nigeria, and so once a year we have. It used to be called Nigerian Day, and then we broadened it to International Day, and now I think it's International Day of Thanksgiving to try and be more inclusive. But the men and the women come in their traditional African dress, and there is. I'm glad that you're sitting down. There are two offerings that are taking, and they actually dance down the aisle to contemporary African music. And you'd be surprised, a lot of the Anglos, I mean, some of them will not be caught dead in the church on that day, but a lot of them sort of like seeing it. And you'll see some heads bob from time to time. So that's something that's particular to St. Barnabas.
It put a little holy boogie in my pants. I was liking it.
Yeah, we went this year. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And then they bring all their food.
We were duking and dancing in the aisles. Yeah.
You don't even ask what the food is. They just bring all this food, and you're like, yes, please.
Yeah.
Just try a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
I ask what it is.
This is
I'm
goat.
not eating goat.
Yeah. I don't know if we've done it in the last couple of years, but Jenny mentioned blessing of the pets. The Saturday closest to St. Francis Day, people bring their pets, and we would have them blessed. And that was sort of a front porch ministry. You'd have people that might not otherwise come to church, but like the idea of having their pet blessed.
That was my first duty assigned to me as a postulant, which there was 5 priests at my church at the time, and I was affectionately nicknamed the pustule, as opposed to postulant. But they gave me the blessing of the animals to do each year, and I hated it at first, and now I love it. It's fun, but that's a custom. Wonderful. What are some other ones? So at our at chapel, on Easter, we would do a procession outside. We would do the Ambrosian liturgy from the 4th century, 3rd, 5th. And so we would go outside the parish and come back around, and you beat on the doors, as you're saying Psalm 24, I think. Who is the King of Glory? Boom, boom, boom. And then the deacon screams out the door, he is the Lord of hosts. I don't know. I'm on a Zoom call. It was fun. And then we would roast a lamb for the vigil feast, and we'd eat it at 1:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. It's a custom. It's a party. A lot of drinks. Anything else? Come on, guys.
We always did a full pig roast at the church that I grew up in. I don't know what Sunday or Saturday, but full on, like there was at least 2. And yeah, over a spit, like full pig, skin and everything.
Oh baby, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder, so we did that one year for Boar's Head Festival, which is the January 6th. It's an Epiphany festival, or 12th night, January 5th, because it's the 12th night festival. It's called Boar's Head because there's some ancient story about how there was a monk traveling to a festival, a 12th night festival, and he had a silver-plated prayer book, and a boar attacked him, and he shoved the prayer book down the boar's throat, and he choked to death. So he dragged the boar to the festival, and they cooked it. So we have Boar's Head Festival.
These monks, man, these guys created some legacies.
Yeah.
For people that were kind of secluded, they sure created some legacies.
I had the art students, Jenny, you'll love this. We had the art students make this huge, grotesque boar's head out of wire and paper mache. Something out of Lord of the Flies, and we put it in the parish hall. Yeah, so customs. What else? Come on, keep it up.
Sunrise services, candlelight services.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, some of my favorite times of the year are like the Easter Vigil service and bringing the light into the sanctuary and things like that, or or on like Maundy, Thursday, I don't know, different churches, some do, some don't, because it's kind of Catholic-y, but doing an overnight vigil with the Blessed Sacrament and staying awake with Jesus.
Yeah, watch with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. There's the reason why I wanted us to name some customs. I was looking at your faces when you were describing your customs that you remember, and people love their customs. And Bishop Ackerman has this wonderful book. It's called "To God Be the Glory," and he makes the argument. I think it's in the preface, but if you can get your children to say, "This is how we do this. This is how we do things. This is all of these little customs." If they know, if there's a culture, because customs contribute to culture. If they have a culture for their faith, they are so much less likely to leave it. I mean, think about the Italians. They have I get this from Bishop Ackerman. He's an Italian. They have a special way of making pasta. And they have all these little customs and little liturgies that surround their life and commemorate certain parts of the year. And there's such staying power in that culture. I mean, to not do the customs is to reject your family. And who does that? Very few people. But a part of the American situation is that because we're so multicultural, we just don't have customs. We become a non-customary culture, which is no culture at all, really. And so I would highly encourage anyone who's watching this on Christ the King, start customs. Be creative, be daring. If you do something and people like it one year, better do it the next year. Josh Kellum, the next baptism, 17-pound brisket. And maybe we're going to be a Prosecco church from now on. I don't know.
You always going to use a horse trough?
I don't know. I don't
know. Touch. I thought that was awesome. But
I don't know if we're going to be the horse trough parish. I'm not sure. Yeah. All right. Guys, thank you. This has been a fun discussion. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Any other thoughts before we close?
I was intrigued by your announcement, Father Tony, that our launch day service is October 11th.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. And it's going to be a big day. I know Father Jason, Josh's brother, is going to be in town, and Bishop Sutton is coming in, and Bishop Gadsden will be there. We're going to have the canon from the Southeast, Father Cameron Robinson. I'm going to invite him to come down. So, yeah, we'll pack it out. So
that will be coming around sooner than we think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's good. It'll be a very exciting day. It's good to set it out in advance because it'll give us something to shoot for. There's a lot to do between now and then. A lot to do. All right, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.